So we are out here in the Alabama hills, and it seems like with so many of the recap videos I see, a regular pilgrimage before you hike Mount Whitney to come on over and pop down just a little quarter-mile trail over to the Mobius Arch. Here is the arch. And there's Whitney.
So here we go. Mount Whitney in one day. I can tell you in the last year since we decided to do this hike, the idea of hiking Mount Whitney has almost become an obsession with me. As I'm sure with many of you, it's just the allure of climbing the highest something. It has always been something that feels pretty innate to our species. And as we're coming up and approaching Whitney Portal here, you can see I put on the time lapse, and you come around this bend and Whitney is just standing there, a monolith. And I look over to my wife and we just think, oh my God, what have we gotten ourselves into?
Hey, so we now are up in Whitney Portal. After hearing some reports of some folks that the stream crossing wasn't that bad, we decided just to go the regular trail. We should be able to bridge it with some rocks. But up in the portal now, got the rooftop tent set up. It's only 7:30 and we're gonna try to go to bed, get up at 2 a.m. and it all begins tomorrow. So away we go.
So, like many others that hike Whitney in a day, we got that Alpine start. 2:15 we all met at the portal. In our group was my family, myself, my wife, my brother, and incredibly, in their late 50s and still killing it, my parents. So blessed to have them on this trip as well. We met two other strangers at the portal who joined onto our group, fabulous additions. And what you're looking at right now is actually the moon. We had a full moon the night that we started. And if you ever have the chance to get a permit and look ahead to see when the full moon is, oh my goodness, it bathes all of the canyon walls, everything in this gorgeous light. It was incredible to hike to. A really great morning, and we had a really good start. So crossing the log bridge is probably one of my favorite parts of the hike because there's stream crossings previous to it where you have to balance on rocks. I would highly recommend poles for any of those sections. And many other stream crossings, I think we counted about a dozen in all, where you had a real chance of getting your feet wet and really had to pick your way through. But with the log bridge crossing here, as you can see, some blessed person put these in, and it was probably one of the most fun sections of the hike. Just because you are walking across, a good 40-50 foot section with these logs, maybe even 100 feet across, and it's beautiful, and you get to cross the stream, and it's kind of fun. But it's one of the great portions of the hike. Everyone's in good spirits so far, just about 3 miles in.
Made it to Trailside Meadow, another log bridge crossing, but we're keeping up good time. I'm very, very excited about the time that we are keeping.
After taking the switchbacks above Outpost Camp up to Mirror Lake, and after picking our way through up to the ridgeline above Mirror Lake, now all of a sudden you get to the stairs section of the hike. And when you're in a high snow year, yeah, there's a good chance that this section is going to have running water through some of the stairs. So as you can see here, we're trying to kind of stay to the side, trying to navigate it. But it certainly presents, another one of these dozens of times where you're going to have to pick your way through these rocks and be careful because they get pretty slippery. Making our way up these stairs, kind of look back and we get our first glimpse of light. It's just past 5 a.m. at this point, and we're kind of picking our way up through alongside the stream, almost about ready to make a cut back up to a higher ridge that will lead us to the traverse beneath trail camp.
Time for headlamps off. 3 hours in. It's about 5:15, and we are to the traverse. It looks like a fair amount of the traverse is now melted out, which is great news.
So here at the traverse, just beneath trail camp, is really our first technical part of the hike. Now, this time that we hiked Whitney, it was in the middle of July on a high snow year. More snow than usual. But at the time that we hiked it, there really wasn't that many snow crossings left. We had to cross maybe about 4 or 5 sections, all less than 100 feet long, where you had to cross snow. So this recap should really be viewed as a summer non-technical hike of Whitney. But nevertheless, we did bring things that would help those short little snow crossings. We had micro spikes, which we actually, interestingly enough, because the sections were so short, we never actually used. But we do have trekking poles there with the spikes on the bottom, and I brought my grandfather's ice axe. Now, my grandfather had just passed away this last year, and he had loved hiking Whitney. He'd hiked Whitney several times before, and so I thought it was a really great tribute to him to bring along his old ice axe. And that's what you see me using here in the traverse. Now you can see that most of it is melted out. You just had to cross these 2 sections. So consider this time that we hiked a pretty non-technical, although to feel secure and safe, you can see here I'm digging in the ice axe uphill side to make sure that if I do slip with one of the feet that I can hold on and don't go down that big chute to the left. Approaching trail camp here. We have just crossed the 12,000 foot barrier. We're all very hyped. You can see the sunrise on the peaks above trail camp here. We've gone just over 6 miles, 3,700 feet of elevation gain in 3.5 hours. The time is 5:45, and we're all feeling pretty good about this. Great spirits heading up here just above trail camp. We stopped for 30 minutes at trail camp to filter water, recharge, make sure we were getting enough calorie intake, and then we began again here in this clip up the very first of 99 switchbacks. Yes, the infamous 99 switchbacks section. You can see Trail Camp Pond where we filled up just below. That's really the last place when there isn't as much snow or melt. The last consistent place to fill up on the trail, which we did.
25 switchbacks up. Whitney over here, and we are just going back and forth, and back and forth.
After 47 switchbacks winding your way above trail camp, you get to a steep rocky outcropping, which is known as the cables. Here you will see cables have been put into the rock on your right side, and depending on the time of the year, as it was a little bit more snow this year, you'll see snow here on the left. And if we had gone actually just a couple weeks before, this whole section would have snow over it to where people were actually hanging on to the cables and going on the right outside of them, kind of hanging on, swinging around beneath the cables to get around these sections of snow. Obviously, this is a critical point in the hike, and one of the places where if it's earlier in the year and there's more snow, depending on what the cables look like, you would either take the switchbacks, which we did, and in a non-technical ascent, you would take the switchbacks, or earlier in the year when you have more snow, where you would take the chute, which is to the right of the switchbacks and needs much more technical crampons, definitely an ice axe gear to do it safely. As you can see here, there's just a little bit of snow clinging onto it on the left. I'm moving pretty slowly. The altitude is, you're definitely starting to feel it here above 12,000. We're 7 miles in, 4,400 elevation gain. Here's the section that was probably toughest when we were there. It looks like someone did a nice, had chiseled out just enough room for maybe one set of feet here to the left of them, but you really had to be careful in this section and kind of pick your way through it slowly.
Not bad, not half bad. Nice work. This is where the 99 switchbacks live up to their reputation. It's not as if my legs are doing anything extraordinary. Nice, even grade, but we're on switchback 89, and at this point in the day, it just feels like you're wading through mud. Just mud.
Here we are on switchback 99. As you can see with the level of snow this year in mid-July, when most of the switchbacks are melted out, you still may have to traverse another section of snow across the top of the chute. You can see here I'm using my ice axe on the wrong side of me, but the length of the shaft of the ice axe that I had, for me in this section where it was kind of tunneled out, it was more comfortable for me to use that. On the downhill side, just in this section, you can see it's kind of concave what I'm walking through. You should really always have the ice axe in your up hand when traversing across in the uphill side, so ignore this technique here. But I am, again, we were lucky that this section of the traverse was kind of nicely hollowed out and kind of made you feel a lot better about the chute beneath you when you had kind of firm walls on both sides. What's interesting about this section of the hike, as you saw, I just got through a little soliloquy on how the altitude was affecting me. You know, you're starting to feel it a lot more, but what's really important about your progress through this section, and I think it's really important for the hike overall, is setting a pace where you don't tire yourself out too quickly. You know, really do even just a little bit slower than you might normally hike, just to kind of get in that groove and stick with it. You know, a lot of people talk about doing lots of stops to acclimatize, but I really believe, and it's always worked for my body well, to hike at a really slow, manageable pace, and your body, and that way you're able to do kind of less stops, keep going slowly, and your body will adjust gradually through that. Just beautiful, incredible views up here coming up to Trail Crest.
John Muir Trail connecting in, 1.9 miles to go. Everyone doing pretty well, except for the part that we're pissed at the trail taking us down 200 feet right after we get to Trail Crest. I hate when trails do that, but this is life. 1,200 feet to go. Here we go.
After having rounded Trail Crest and with Whitney in sight, you go consecutively through sections of about 200 feet down to the John Muir Trail, which is maddening at the time. Then you get into the narrows section a few weeks earlier in the year with a little bit more snow. This section really presents some hazardous things for the hiker. When we did it, it was mostly melted out, luckily. And then right after the narrow section, you'll get to an area of several windows you get to consecutively. This is the first one where we elected to do a little climb up, take a look down into the valley below where we came from. And at this point, we're only going at about an average pace of 1 mile an hour. The trail is not difficult. It's maybe a little rocky in some places, but it's really a nicely graded trail, and we are just slogging along. The effects of altitude are something that I can't even really begin to describe to you in retrospect, so I'm just going to let you watch me struggle with this live. And actually, the effect that you're seeing on the camera right now was not something that I put in afterwards. It actually was just sweat on the camera, but it gives this amazing effect of almost exactly how I was feeling at the time. Was in that above 14,000 feet, you are just in a daze. And I mean, unless you've spent so much time up here acclimatizing, which we did spend 3 days beforehand in Mammoth, which is 8,300 feet, this section still is just a beast, and you just can't move very quickly. It's just an incredible feeling.
This whole video at this point is just going to be a video of me breathing. Good news, no headache. Haven't had one yet. Better news, knee feels excellent. Slightly worse news, my lungs working so hard. Got a couple of stitches in my back. We are really getting there. The edge of the snow there, trail as well. I think that's the one we're gonna try and take. Get this over with. It's crazy. Never in my life has my body felt so good, and yet felt so sluggish.
Just below the summit on the western half of the Whitney Plateau, it's really our last technical section of the climb. A few weeks after us, or a few weeks before us, it'd be a very different set of choices. But with a lot of snow still there on the western half, we elected just to do some mild scrambling and to go straight up towards the summit. Later in the year, when everything is melted out, the trail gradually takes its way along the western part of the plateau more gradually and winds its way around one more switchback. The final couple hundred meters of Mount Whitney are kind of like the end to a marathon. You've had a really tough half-second stretch, but when you see that finish line in sight, your spirits just pick up. And in this next clip, you're gonna see me get really emotional. Might have been a little altitude, might have been a little bit that I was building towards this moment for the last year, but it was just an incredible feeling when that summit hut comes into sight. You just want to cry. I mean, you have made it, you are there, and you have gotten to the highest point in the contiguous 48.
I'm on the verge of tears right now. There's the summit hut. The dream has become a reality.
So you've done it. You've been to the highest point in the continental United States, and then it hits you. Yeah, you're only halfway. You have to go back down. And the first little bit down, you're like, oh yeah, I got this. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Not breathing is heavy. But then the miles start going by, mile after mile, and the pounding on your knees and your legs, you really have to tell them. The automaticity of walking doesn't even happen anymore. You have to tell your legs, take another step, and take another step, and take another step. And by the time you get down to the lower miles, those last few miles, it almost feels like a controlled fall. You are just stumbling your way back to the portal and just keeping in your mind that burger and the fries at the portal. That sleep that you're going to have this evening. It's everything. So take your time. Make sure you have a clear turnaround time in mind so that you get back down. And it ended up being actually about 8 hours up exactly for us to the top. We spent 45 minutes up there, and then it was 6.5 hours down, which was much longer than we anticipated. Now, we did spend 30 minutes on the way back down at Trail Camp Pond, once again filtering water. My recommendation for the hike is that you'd probably use, depending on your body size, anywhere between 4 and 5 liters. I ended up using about 5 myself, and so we wanted to use at least have 2 liters on your way up to trail camp. Refill, make sure you have a full 3 liters for that 10 miles up to the summit and back to trail camp. Used every one of those for sure. And then make sure you're filled up again with at least 2 or 3 liters on the way back down. When it heats up in the afternoon and you're just slogging down those endless miles, it really does help to have as much water as you can. Now obviously you want to fill up given that it's a little more weight to what you think you might drink, but please at least put a half a liter to a liter buffer in there of what you think you might drink. Before we were supposed to hike, I partially tore my ACL. I was limping around, and I definitely thought that the dream was over, that it was dead. And then I got back in the gym the next day, and we kept going, and I really want to thank my wife Prianka, who really coached me and helped me through all of this, was an absolute warrior, dislocated her shoulder herself on this journey. My brother Kevin, who is up for any adventure and is the biggest beast of a hiker I've ever seen. And this especially to my parents, Wendy and Scott, who, at almost 60 years old, are still able to chase and achieve the dreams of young men and women. So thanks to all those that were in the crew. We had an incredible time at Whitney. Finished the hike in just under 15 hours, and everything was beautiful and nothing hurt.